Let's be real, people lie more than you think. It's not always the strangers you suspect lurking in the shadows. It could be your friend, your partner, or even someone in your family. We like to believe we're good at spotting lies, but the truth is that we often ignore the red flags because we want to trust the people close to us. I've been there. I used to think I was a great judge of character, convinced I could read people like an open book. But that belief was shattered when I discovered that someone I trusted had been lying to my face for months. The problem wasn't that I didn't see the signs. It was that I chose to overlook them. They were right in front of me. Those tiny shifts in their behavior, the exaggerated explanations, and the sudden defensiveness. I convinced myself it was nothing, that my instincts were simply being paranoid. The truth is, people lie all the time. It can be for various reasons, to protect feelings, avoid conflict, or simply to escape accountability. But the more we allow these lies to fester in our lives, the more damage they can cause. They erode trust, create confusion, and ultimately harm our relationships. Recognizing these signs is just the beginning. Once you become aware of potential deception in your relationships, it's crucial to approach the situation with open communication. Rather than jumping to conclusions, consider discussing your concerns with the person involved. Sometimes misunderstandings can lead to misplaced suspicion, and a candid conversation can clear the air. However, if you find that deception is a recurring theme in your interactions, it may be time to re-evaluate those relationships. Surround yourself with people who value honesty and integrity. These individuals will help foster an environment of trust and support. So, if you're ready to strip away the illusions and face reality, take the first step today. Acknowledge that lies exist and learn to spot the signs. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced deception in your relationships? How did you confront it? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell for more insights on navigating life's complexities. Let's continue this journey together toward authenticity and truth. Number 1. Quick to change the subject. Have you ever had a conversation where someone dodged your questions so fast it felt like you were playing verbal dodgeball? You bring up something important, maybe a topic you're really invested in, and suddenly, boom, they're off talking about something else entirely. It's like they have an escape route ready at all times, and the moment things get too real, they disappear into the safety of a completely unrelated topic. Let me share a personal story. I was once in a relationship where this happened all the time. Honestly, at first, I didn't even notice it. Whenever I'd bring up future plans, something as simple as where we wanted to be in a year, or how we'd handle tough situations, they'd instantly steer the conversation towards something completely irrelevant, like what we should eat for dinner, or what random thing they saw on Instagram that day. It was subtle, almost sneaky, and I let it slide because I didn't want to push too hard. I convinced myself they just weren't ready for the conversation, or maybe I was being too intense. But here's the thing, they were never ready, and that was a sign of something much deeper than just avoiding a topic. It was avoiding responsibility. This brings me to the controversial point. People aren't just changing the subject because they're forgetful or distracted. No. They're doing it because facing the truth is uncomfortable, and many would rather avoid it than confront reality. And we let them get away with it because we don't want to seem like we're pushing too hard. We prefer to maintain the peace, even if it means letting lies slip through the cracks. But this is where we go wrong. Dodging a tough conversation doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means inviting dishonesty. Now here's the deeper message. When someone is quick to change the subject, it's not just avoidance, it's a refusal to engage with the truth, a sign that they value their comfort over your clarity. And what does that say about the foundation of your relationship? whether it's a partner, a friend, or even a colleague. A lie doesn't always come in the form of a blatant falsehood. Sometimes it's as subtle as a change in conversation. We think the only lies worth calling out are the ones spoken aloud, but the lies left unsaid are the ones that erode trust slowly. Piece by piece, I realized this the hard way. Every time I allowed the conversation to shift, I was silently accepting their avoidance, giving them a pass to keep me in the dark. I wanted to believe that things were fine, so I let the subject change, but that's the danger of letting people steer conversations away from the truth. It's not just about the topic being avoided, it's about the relationship's integrity being compromised. So here's what I've learned. Don't let people off the hook when they try to change the subject. It's not about being confrontational, it's about setting a standard for honesty. If someone values you, they'll face the hard conversations head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And if they don't, maybe it's time to ask yourself what kind of relationship you're really building, because truth, however difficult, builds stronger bonds than any carefully constructed lie. Number 2, listen to understand, not to respond. Listening is one of the most underrated skills in the art of charm. Yet it's the foundation of making people feel truly special. The problem: most of us don't actually listen. We wait for our turn to speak. We're so busy crafting our next brilliant response that we miss the chance to really hear what someone is saying, and that's the fastest way to make someone feel invisible. Here's a controversial truth. If you're not listening to understand, you're wasting your time. I've been guilty of it myself. Sitting in conversations, nodding along, pretending to be engaged, but internally preparing my next point. And guess what? People feel that they know when you're just waiting for your turn to talk. It doesn't make them feel valued. It makes them feel used. That's not charm or selfishness, but when you listen to truly understand, not only are you showing that person respect, but you're also building a connection that's deeper than surface-level chit-chat. You're giving them the space to be heard without the pressure of a back-and-forth debate. I remember a time I was having a conversation with a colleague who was clearly going through a tough time. My natural instinct was to jump in and offer advice to fix their problem, but instead, I stopped myself and just listened. No interjection, no advice, just pure attention. And you know what happened? They opened up even more because they felt safe. By the end of the conversation, they told me, "I've never felt so heard." That was the moment I realized, sometimes the best thing you can do is simply listen. Here's the deeper message in a world full of noise. Genuine listening is a rare gift. People don't want constant advice or opinions. They want understanding. They want to feel like someone gets them. And when you can give that gift, you instantly stand out as someone who cares. That's real charm. So stop listening just to reply. Listen to understand. That's how you make people feel truly seen and valued. And that's where the real magic of connection happens. Number 3, defensive without cause. Have you ever asked someone a simple, harmless question and they respond like you've accused them of a crime? It's like, "Hey, did you grab the last slice of pizza?" And suddenly they're launching into a whole monologue about how they would never do something like that, and how dare you even suggest such a thing. It's a wild overreaction, like they've been caught doing something way worse than just eating the last slice. That's what I call getting defensive without cause, a massive red flag that screams, "I'm hiding something." Let me tell you a story. I was once in a group project situation, and one of my teammates started acting all weird whenever I asked for an update on his part of the work. I'd ask, "Hey, how's it going with the report?" A pretty normal question. But he'd immediately go on the defensive, saying stuff like, "Why do you always think I'm slacking off? I've been working really hard. I don't need to be micromanaged." This was the same guy who spent most of our meetings scrolling through his phone. Mind you, it wasn't long before we found out he'd barely done any of his share and was trying to cover it up the whole time. Here's the controversial part. People who get overly defensive when they've got nothing to worry about are usually the ones guilty of something. It's the classic hit dog. I've learned from experience that when someone reacts this way, it's a good time to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What are they so desperately trying to protect? Because if someone is truly innocent or has nothing to hide, they won't feel the need to turn a casual question into an attack on their character. Honest people are calm and straightforward. Guilty people, they're on high alert, like they're waiting for the hammer to drop. The deep message here is about understanding human nature. When people act defensive without a real reason, it's their guilt talking, not their integrity, and you've got to be bold enough to recognize that their overreaction isn't about you being out of line. It's about them trying to keep you from uncovering the truth. They're like a house with all the doors locked, but pretending nothing's wrong. Meanwhile, you're holding the key and they're hoping you never try to open the door. And here's the real kicker. When we ignore these defensive reactions, we allow lies to thrive. We teach people that they can get away with deception by making us feel bad for even asking. But it's not about being rude or intrusive. It's about valuing honesty over comfort. People will twist themselves in knots to avoid being caught in a lie, and defensiveness is just one of their tactics. So the next time someone gets ridiculously defensive over a question that doesn't warrant it, don't back down. Stay curious. Push a little harder, because 9 times out of 10, their reaction is a smokescreen to cover up the truth, and you deserve better than to live behind that smoke. Number 4. Over-polished details. Have you ever heard someone tell a story and it's so perfectly crafted that it feels like it was rehearsed for an Oscar-worthy performance? Every detail is perfectly placed, the timing is immaculate, and the story flows so seamlessly that it almost feels too good to be true. Well, guess what it probably is. I've run into this more times than I care to admit. There was this one guy I knew, let's call him Jake, who could spin stories like no one else. I'm talking about tales that had the kind of cinematic flair you expect from a Hollywood script. One time he told us about this supposed business deal he closed, and he described every moment like he was giving us a play-by-play from a James Bond movie. Everything was just so smooth down to the exact second he signed the contract and how he sealed the deal with a firm handshake, gazing out over the city skyline. You could almost hear the soundtrack swelling in the background. The problem is, reality is messy. Life doesn't follow a script, and when someone's story sounds like they've rehearsed it for a TED Talk, your lie detector should be going off. It turned out Jake had exaggerated half of it and straight up fabricated the other half. But here's the controversial bit. Most people don't want to call out over-polished details because, let's face it, we like a good story. We love hearing tales that are neat, engaging and match, so we let it slide even when our gut tells us something's off. And that's exactly how liars get away with it. They rely on our need for a tidy narrative. We want the story to make sense, to be clean, and easy to digest the messiness of the truth that's inconvenient. But life doesn't come in perfect packages, and when someone's story is too smooth, you're probably hearing fiction, not fact. Now here's where it gets deep. When someone over-polishes the details, they're not just trying to impress you. They're trying to control the narrative. They want you to believe a version of events that is precisely crafted to benefit them. It's like they're the director, the writer, and the star of their own movie. And you're just the audience expected to clap along without question. But that's where you need to step back and realize that perfect doesn't exist in real life. I learned this the hard way when I started digging deeper into Jake's stories. Whenever I'd ask for a little more detail, things would start to unravel. The crisp edges of his narrative would blur, and suddenly what had once been a flawless tale of success turned into a patchy, awkward mess. That's the thing about liars. They can rehearse, but they can't handle the follow-up questions. Real-life details are chaotic, and when someone's too smooth, it's a sign they're crafting a fantasy rather than recounting the truth. The deep message here: life is complex, messy, and full of imperfections. And that's a good thing when someone tries to present you with a story where every detail is perfectly aligned, where nothing goes wrong and everything clicks into place. They're selling you an illusion, and if you buy into it, you're doing yourself a disservice, because real connection, real trust, and real relationships aren't built on fairy tales. They're built on raw honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. So the next time you hear someone give you a story that's a little too polished, don't just sit back and enjoy the show. Ask questions. Dig deeper. The real truth is messy, and if someone's not willing to show you the imperfections, they're not showing you the truth at all. Remember, life doesn't need to be perfect to be honest, and anyone who pretends otherwise is probably hiding something they don't want you to see. Number 5. Body turned away from you. Have you ever noticed when someone's body is angled away from you, even if they're talking directly to you? It's like their words are saying, "Hey, I'm engaged," but their body is screaming, "I'd rather be anywhere else right now." It's one of those subtle, almost sneaky signals that people don't think you'll catch, but trust me, it speaks volumes. Let me give you a real example. I once had a friend who, whenever we got into deeper conversations, would subtly shift his body away. At first, I thought maybe it was just how he sat. Maybe he wasn't comfortable. But the more it happened, the clearer it became. Whenever we touched on something personal or uncomfortable, his body would start turning away, like it was trying to physically escape the conversation. I didn't need a psychology degree to figure out something was off. Eventually, I found out he had been lying about a few things, nothing major, but still enough to break some trust. His body knew it before his words ever let it slip. Here's where the controversy kicks in. A lot of people will brush off body language as unimportant or overthinking, but that's where they're wrong. Your body doesn't lie the way your words can. When someone turns their body away from you, even just slightly, it's like their subconscious is trying to distance themselves from the truth. And the worst part is, most of us ignore these signs because we don't want to deal with what they could mean. We convince ourselves it's just a habit or no big deal, but let's be real. If someone's physically distancing themselves from you, it's a red flag. Maybe it's not always about a massive lie, but it's definitely a sign that something's off. And here's the deeper point: when people can't face you directly. It's not just about comfort, it's about confrontation. They don't want to confront the reality of the situation, and their body language is betraying them before they even realize it. I used to ignore these signs, thinking maybe I'm reading into things too much. But after seeing it play out time and time again, I've learned that when someone physically turns away from you mid-conversation, they're not just doing it because they're restless. They're subconsciously trying to avoid being fully seen, because deep down they're hiding something. The real message here is that body language doesn't just happen in a vacuum. If someone's body turns away from you while they're speaking, it's a signal that they're uncomfortable with what's being discussed. They might be trying to shield themselves not from you, but from the truth they don't want to reveal. It's like they think if they turn away, maybe they can escape your ability to see through them. I'll tell you what I've learned from all this. Don't ignore these signs. Sure, it might feel awkward to notice and even more awkward to bring it up, but body language is one of the most honest forms of communication. When someone turns away from you, they're creating distance emotionally, mentally, and physically. And if you don't address it, that distance only grows. So the next time you're in a conversation and notice someone subtly angling away, take it as a cue. Maybe it's time to ask the tough question they don't want to answer. Maybe it's time to probe deeper and figure out what they're hiding, because honesty doesn't turn its back on you, and neither should the people you trust. Number 6. Laughing off serious topics. Have you ever tried to have a serious conversation with someone and they just laughed it off like it's nothing? You're there trying to talk about something meaningful, maybe a personal issue or something that's been bothering you, using humor as a shield to dodge the truth. At first, it might seem innocent, maybe even charming, but trust me, when someone's laughing off serious topics, it's often a sign they're hiding something. Here's a personal story. I was once in a relationship where I'd try to bring up important issues, real talk, the stuff that matters. I'd say something like, "Hey, I've been feeling disconnected lately," and the response was a laugh followed by, "Oh, you're overthinking things." Relax. That laugh wasn't just a casual response. It was a way to dismiss the conversation and avoid dealing with the issue. And guess what? Over time, I realized that any time I tried to address something serious, it was met with humor, sarcasm, or a quick joke. What I learned was that laughter was a way to dodge accountability and avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Here's where it gets controversial. We've all been conditioned to think humor is a good thing. It lightens the mood, diffuses tension, and makes everyone feel comfortable. But when someone constantly uses laughter to sidestep serious topics, it's a red flag. It's like they're trying to smuggle lies past you disguised as jokes. And here's the kicker. Most people will let them get away with it because no one wants to be the buzzkill who presses too hard on a topic after someone's turned it into a joke. People laugh off serious stuff because they don't want to deal with the weight of the conversation. It's an escape route, plain and simple. They want to keep things light and breezy so you don't dig deeper. But here's the truth. Real conversations, the ones that matter, aren't supposed to be easy or light all the time. They're supposed to challenge you, to make you think, to push you toward honesty. And if someone can't handle that, you have to ask yourself, what are they really hiding behind those laughs? There's a deeper message here about emotional maturity. When people laugh off serious topics, they're signaling that they're not ready or, worse, not willing to have an honest conversation. It's like they're putting a shiny, jokey facade over something they know they can't explain. Maybe it's fear of being vulnerable, or maybe it's because they know if they actually talk about it, they'll expose the truth they've been trying to bury. I've seen this pattern over and over again. People use humor to deflect, to make you feel like you're the one taking things too seriously. But let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with taking things seriously, especially when it comes to important matters. And if someone laughs it off, don't be afraid to call them out. "Why is this funny to you?" is a simple question that can expose the underlying discomfort they're trying to hide. The real issue with laughing off serious topics is that it shuts down the conversation before it can even start. It's like putting up a giant no entry sign on the road to real communication. And if you don't address it, those critical conversations you need to have about relationships, trust, accountability, never happen. Everything stays on the surface and nothing gets resolved. Here's the deeper message. Honesty isn't always fun. It isn't always light-hearted, and it's not something that should be laughed away. If someone can't take serious things seriously, it's not just about them dodging one conversation. It's about them avoiding real connection and truth. And if they can't face those tough topics with you, how much trust can you really put in them? So next time they can't face those tough topics with you, how much trust can you really put in them? So next time someone laughs off a serious conversation, don't let it slide. Ask the hard questions. Press on the uncomfortable truth, because laughter may lighten the moment, but it doesn't erase the weight of what's really going on underneath. If they're not willing to drop the act, you've got your answer. They're not being honest with you. Number 7, vagueness when pressed for specifics. Have you ever had that moment when you ask someone for details and suddenly they turn into a poet full of ambiguity and grand gestures but no actual information? You press them for specific dates, names, facts, and they give you a bunch of fluff, circling around the point like they're dancing in a fog. It's one of the most frustrating things, but it's also a massive red flag. If someone can't give you straight answers when pressed, they're probably hiding something. Let me give you an example from my own life. I once had a co-worker who would always talk about these big deals they were closing. But whenever anyone asked for more details, like what companies they were working with or how far along the negotiations were, it became an art form in evasion. Oh, we're just in the early stages. Some really exciting conversations are happening. I can't say too much right now, but it's huge. Weeks would pass and we'd ask again, and it was the same song and dance. Eventually we found out that not only was the no deal, but he'd made up half the conversations he was bluffing, hoping nobody would dig too deep. Now here's the control over part. When someone gets vague, when you ask for specifics, it's not just that they're being secretive, it's that they're lying. Let's call it what it is. Vagueness is the liar's best friend because it allows them to escape accountability. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. You think you're getting somewhere, but they keep slipping away with half answers, and it's complicated responses. They're betting on you being too polite or too distracted to push them harder. Here's the thing. People who are being honest don't need to hide behind vagueness. They can give you clear answers because they have nothing to protect. If you ask them for details, they'll give you the information straight up. No dance, no smoke, no mirrors, but a liar. They thrive in the gray areas. They know that the more vague they can be, the harder it is for you to pin them down. It's classic avoidance behavior, and most people fall for it because we've been trained to not push too hard. It's like we don't want to come off as rude or needy for answers. Now let's be real for a second. We've all been in situations where we've been vague ourselves, right? Maybe we weren't prepared, maybe we felt cornered, or maybe we just didn't want to admit that we didn't know something. But here's the difference. Someone who's honest will own up to that. I'm not sure right now, or I need to check on that. That is a whole lot different than giving you a bunch of fluff just to sound like they're in control. The problem arises when people deliberately use vagueness to avoid being caught. There's a deep message here about integrity and trust. When someone won't give you straight answers, they're undermining the foundation of trust in your relationship, whether that's personal or professional. And the worst part is they're relying on your good nature to not push them too hard. They're banking on the idea that you'll let it slide because pushing for specifics feels awkward. But here's the thing. When you feel that awkwardness creeping in, that's the exact moment you need to double down and ask for clarity. People who can't handle being specific when asked directly are people who aren't comfortable with the truth. And that's the controversial truth most people won't tell you. They'll say, oh, maybe they're just bad with details, or maybe they're too busy. But I've learned from experience that real honesty doesn't shy away from specifics. If they care about being truthful with you, they'll be clear. If they're dancing around the question, that's them signaling they've got something to hide. I've stopped letting people off the hook with vague answers. If you want to know if someone's being straight with you, watch how they respond when you ask for specifics. Do they get uncomfortable? Do they give you a bunch of broad, sweeping statements without any real content? That's your cue to dig deeper, and if they still can't give you a clear answer, take it as a sign that they're not being honest. Here's the deeper takeaway. Honesty isn't always convenient, but it's clear. It's direct. It doesn't hide behind ambiguity. When people refuse to give you specifics, they're afraid of what the details will reveal. It's like they're building a wall of vagueness to keep you from seeing the truth. And if they can't tear down that wall for you, then you've got to ask yourself why they're building it in the first place. So the next time someone gives you a vague answer when you're pressing for specifics, don't back down. You deserve clarity, and anyone who respects you enough will be willing to give it to you, because vagueness might feel like a small thing, but in the grand scheme, it's a big sign of deeper issues that can erode trust faster than any lie ever could. All right, here's the bottom line. Lies don't always come wrapped in obvious deceit. Sometimes it's the little things, the vague answers, the polished stories, the awkward laughs that give it all away. If you start paying attention to these subtle signs, you'll see the truth that people try to hide in plain sight. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and don't settle for half-truths. At the end of the day, you deserve honesty, and the people who can't tell you that are the ones you need to let go of. Stay sharp, stay true,